episode of the Big Sky Now podcast. I am your host, Josh Amick. The panel is still missing Mark this week, but we have our regulars, Fritz, John, and Ian with us. Believe it or not, the regular season has come to an end as we're getting ready for FCS playoffs. But we will get into what happened over the weekend in the final week of the regular season. Another year has gone by where the Cat-Griz game has not been much of a game, with teams in the last recent years blowing out each other on each side of the football. With this being such a well-known historic rivalry, Fritz, why in recent years have these games not been very close at all?
You know, I kind of researched today. You know, somebody suggested that it just comes down to great senior classes, and the Bobcats certainly have a really nice senior class, but when I look back at it, 3 years ago in 2021, when the Grizz won 27-10, they had some senior linemen, but their best one was Dylan Cook, who a couple years before had been playing quarterback at MSU Northern in Havre. And then he transferred. He was the biggest player on Havre's team. And when he came back to the Grizz and walked on, he earned himself a scholarship by being an offensive lineman for about 2 weeks. So it's hard to explain. I think teams just get on a roll. I think home field clearly provides an advantage, but when I go back through the years, it's just the studs really make good plays for the home team, and that's the difference. 2022, the Cats won 55-21. They did have a good senior class. Willie Patterson, Callahan O'Reilly, Kai Okada. Seb Valdez was a great on the defensive line. Last year, you go back to Missoula, the Grizz dominate 37-7. And I think Vegan brought that up last week, is like how much the Grizz lost on defense off that squad last year. Gubner up front was just a phenomenal middle guy, D-tackle for him, nose guard in their three-man front, and Kopang, two linebackers who were great, Levi Janicaro and Braxton Hill, and the list goes on and on. So I think it's just, your studs are there and they're making plays in front of a boisterous home crowd, and pretty soon it's a boat race.
I definitely think the home field environment has something to do with it. It definitely can't have everything to do with it, because we've seen in the past teams go on runs and get wins on the road in this rivalry, But as Fritz kind of mentioned, teams making plays, a lot of times in these last 5 years, the home team has made a big play early on and gotten that crowd that extra little fury. I mean, Montana State with a nice 9-minute drive this past week, keeps the Grizz offense off the field to start the game. 14 plays, pounded in for 6. Grizz back in 2021, they hit Junior Bergen for the big 75-yard touchdown. So it gets the crowd into it early, and it puts the road team behind the 8 ball in an already hostile environment, more hostile than you're going to play in at all this year. So I think that the crowd definitely plays and the environment plays into the factor, but it can't be everything. It's just, to me, I think it's just been the better teams won. This year the Cats have been unstoppable. In the past, we've seen that. Montana last year, national championship, second place in the whole nation. So it's just been some good matchups that, it doesn't always go the way it's going to be close, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to also just pin it on home field advantage, but certainly that does play a role. It's a lot harder to get off to a strong start when you're playing in a raucous environment on the road in a rivalry game, right? Maybe getting a little bit of a hole. We saw that early. I mean, Montana was able to cut it to 7-3, but then you start pressing a little bit to get back into it. You go for it on 4th down, don't get it. Montana State's able to rally and get a field goal, 25 seconds left in the first half. It's just kind of things like that kind of start to add up when you're not able to get off to a strong start, and that's very difficult on the road against a very talented team.
Yeah, I'm new to this rivalry, so I'm curious to see how it plays out in my time here, because doesn't seem like in the last couple of years these games have been very close, and I am definitely looking forward to checking those out one of these days. But moving on, a game that we probably didn't expect to be close, but ended up being a very close game, was UC Davis against Sacramento State. UC Davis pulled off the win 42-39. With these last two tough games with UC Davis, with the Bobcats the week before, and now Sac State, how important is it for UC Davis to get a first-round bye? I feel like they're kind of trending downwards, and maybe these last two games have took a lot of toll on the team. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I mean, you can throw the game at Montana in there too. So 3 straight weeks of some tough opponents. So it's always nice to get a bye. You get that extra rest, especially when you've got high volume guys. Hastings out of the back is throwing the ball a lot. Larison both running it and receiving. He makes a lot of plays. So to be able to get those guys some rest and make sure that they're 100% from any nagging injuries that might, be picked up throughout the season is super important. Also, I just think for the Aggies, getting that bye kind of solidifies maybe gets that, after being shorted last season, they fully completed that comeback now and put themselves into a great position. So now I think you get ready for the second season, you get healthy, and being able to welcome somebody out all the way to the West Coast is going to be a big advantage for them.
I agree. It's super important. You look how they finished the regular season, obviously against Montana State, and now a rivalry game against Sac State. And then you go back 2 weeks before then, they played a 10-point game on the road against Eastern. And I think it was Northern Colorado in between that Eastern and Montana game. So it's been a tough stretch to end the regular season, obviously getting a first round bye. Like John said, for some of those high volume players like Hastings and like Larison, who just kind of seems to do it all every week. It's going to be a big week to be able to get those guys rested up. It looks like UC Davis just kind of let their foot off the gas a little bit after being up 21-7. You look at the third quarter, 2 3-and-outs. And then towards the end of that third quarter, they're able to get that drive going before scoring to take the lead back in the fourth quarter. But yeah, I mean, especially just kind of grueling end of the season for them, that I think you can maybe excuse a little bit for letting their foot off the gas there in that third quarter. But I think they're lucky that they didn't end up losing this game. Obviously, that would have been a tough one to affect their seedings in this playoffs.
I think they had a first round bye locked up, win or lose. I think we're forgetting the Causeway Classic is 70 years old. That's the rivalry game. So the Hornets were not only fired up, they were getting kids back to Gavin Davis-Smith, number 27 at safety, was kind of a thorn in Lan Larison's side until, 2 minutes were left. And I don't know, Andy Thompson and Tim Plow were on the same coaching staff at NEU for 4 seasons, 2013 to 2016. Plow actually got emotional after the game, talking about his good friend being across the field and having a rough season, and hoped he would be back because he thinks he's a tremendous coach. And I was impressed with the way the Hornets played. I mean, Conklin's as somebody mentioned, maybe it was John last week, he's a freshman. Threw for 389. Hastings threw for 398. We also had 1,000 yards of offense. It was a great game. And I think Davis would have liked to have had a laugher and give Lan Larison less than 27 touches.
Yeah.
But they needed him to crank off a 59-yard run for a touchdown with 2 minutes left to make it a 2-score game and finally give himself some breathing room. The good news is like MSU and Idaho, they get to get some guys healthy and little 2-week break, and they'll regroup, and I imagine they'll win 1 or 2 games and make up for last year's snubbing.
Fritz, I do want to follow up with something. I didn't get a chance to see that post-game interview. So with the players getting emotional, or coaches on the other side, as you referenced, we talked about earlier in the year about Sac State coach maybe being on the hot seat. Do you think the way that they ended the season and kind of have backing from players and other coaches that maybe his job is okay for the time being?
Yeah, well, I mean, he's just so well regarded by, some good coaches, some awfully good coaches. And it's year 2. I think I mentioned I did think he was on the hot seat, but man, they played well, I thought, on Saturday. And I think he deserves another year at least to get some kids healthy. I mean, it was Vegan that pointed out before they beat him pretty badly that, there wasn't a single starter back on defense by the time they got to the Cat game this year. So just a host of injuries and a tough schedule. But I think they ended up on the upswing, and I think Andy Thompson's a heck of a guy and a good coach, and I think he deserves another year. I think he'll get it.
Yeah, and with Conklin hopefully coming back for a sophomore year, they could be a team that turns things around very, very quickly. So we're all rooting for him to do well down there. Moving on to NAU, they got it done by beating Eastern. That was a game we're kind of unsure about. We thought Eastern was playing really well to end the season. They could have snuck one out, but that NAU home field advantage was too powerful, I guess. How are you impressed, or how impressed are you by Brian Wright in his first year at NAU and getting his team into the playoffs and getting to that 8-4 record?
I mean, anytime there's a three-game difference in win totals, you're going to be impressed from year to year, right? Obviously, it was a different staff last year, but you kind of saw this building towards the end of the last season. They defeated Montana last year, and then down the stretch of the season, had a win over UC Davis and won 3 of their last 4 games. You could kind of see it brewing a little bit, and then came into this year, obviously now getting to 8 wins and getting into the playoffs. I'm pretty impressed with them down there in the first year of that coaching staff. Obviously, you would have liked to see them win one of those ranked games. I know they beat Sac State earlier in the year, and that was kind of maybe the knock on them going into this selection for them getting into the playoffs. But I mean, they have a chance this weekend. So,
yeah, I think it helped them to be 6-2 in league. You know, the Grizz, they're 5-3 and got in. So I don't see how I could get one without the other. And I should mention that I don't believe the cover was exactly bare, like Ian said. You know, they had 5 wins last year. A couple of them were really good wins. And that said, Brian Wright's done a really good job. Quarterback Pennington looks like he has, you know, star quality. And then impressively, they had 2 fourth-quarter drives. They were down 18-17, and they had a drive that ended in the fourth quarter to get them ahead, 61 yards, and then they had put together another 66-yard drive for the final score. And I can think of a few Lumberjack teams that just didn't seem to have that in the tank when the going got tough. So kudos to the Jacks. I think they deserve to be in, and I've got a funny feeling they might play 2 weeks this postseason.
Yeah,
No teaser there.
I think Fritz is onto something there. I think that their matchup with Abilene Christian is going to be one to watch for sure. It's impressive to go out and when you take a team that hasn't been to the playoffs since 2017, he's driven them to their highest ranking since 2017. Now they're number 17 in the coaches or in the polls. So just getting to the playoffs is great, even if it was last 4 in. I know Sam Herder, I saw on Twitter, he kind of made mention that it was a fairly easy selection process this year. There wasn't too much in terms of teams on the bubble that were, you know, the bubble wasn't exactly tight. It seemed like it was a lot of 8-4 versus 7-5s. So it definitely helped them to win this one. It would have made the bubble a lot more interesting, I think, if they dropped to Eastern. But yeah, I think that there's some definite coach of the year. Got to be some coach of the year talk around Brian Wright, and I know with Plow also and Began going 12-0, it's definitely going to be the 3 of them that have to be in the talks for the coach of the year.
Yeah, it was a very impressive year for his head coach Brian Wright. So congrats to Lumberjacks. I know us on the Big Sky podcast will be rooting for you in the playoffs. Moving on to Idaho. Idaho played Idaho State. Wasn't much of a game either. Idaho's defense showed up. It looked like the defense that they were all season long. Nate Thomas led the backfield this week for the Vandals. Last week it was Art Williams, who didn't even play this week. Is this team really just a plug-and-play team, or do we think that this team is getting healthy at the right moment in the season, Fritz?
Well, I think they're going to be happy to have an extra week to get some guys healthy. Yeah, they've had 4 different guys. Well, Art Williams last week was 96 yards, and then, you know, the freshman Deshaun Buchanan, who also didn't play last week or this past Saturday, he had the 212-yard game, and Nate Thomas had 171 against Idaho State, and all of a sudden they're down to 1, and it didn't matter. That was good enough to beat Idaho State on the road. I think we all thought that was going to be a closer game. Yeah, Idaho's a little plug and play. They've recruited well. They've got some depth. I think it's worth pointing out that their 3 losses this year are to Oregon, which is number 1, and Montana State, which is number 1 in the FCS, and the 5th seed in the FCS. They also beat. So they should probably be seeded higher. And I don't like that all 3 of the highly seeded teams in the Big Sky are on the same side of the bracket. I wish they'd split them up and give us a chance at a all Big Sky final. But Idaho's got it going on. You know who also didn't play Saturday? Keyshawn James Newby, the DN transfer from Tech, and
Yeah.
he'll hopefully be back in a couple weeks too. They play the CAA champion Richmond. Well, assuming Richmond wins, we're not going to predict that this week, are we? But I think Richmond's going to be the favorite this weekend. Then they'll go to Moscow, and that it was a Colonial team that knocked Idaho out last year, Albany. So, there's some Vandals have some things to prove. Let's see if they can get healthy and get more than one running back healthy, and see what they do in 2 weeks.
Prince, you bring up a lot of good points that I want to pivot John to. John, I know you did that piece about the FCS playoffs. I think Idaho, correct me if I'm wrong, was ranked number 8. Do you think with them going 9-3 and the losses that Fritz just mentioned, that this team should have been a lot higher in the FCS final rankings?
Yeah, I definitely think that they should have been seated at least up at 6. I don't think you can put them above UC Davis because of the head-to-head, but I do think that they were worthy of getting into a little bit of a higher seed. And Richmond is a terrible draw. I mean, they've won 9 straight games, I believe, now in the CAA. Get that playoff win. They're coming in with a lot of momentum. It's gonna be a battle if Richmond does get through that first round when they meet up in Moscow. So I don't think the committee did them any service for their body of work this season. Like Fritz mentioned, they've lost to Oregon, and that one was a very close game. They were down 3 in the fourth quarter of that game. Yeah. So if only lose by 10, and then to lose to Montana State and UC Davis, who are number 1 and number 5, it definitely is a disservice, I think, for their ranking. But as for them getting healthy, it's nice to see Jack Lane back playing full games. It's the running back position has been good. They've got a freshman out at wide receiver that's made his way onto the Jerry Rice Award list, top 25 this name today. So it's looking good for the Vandals right now if they can take this off week to maybe shore up anybody else who's maybe been injured, missing time, or just maybe came back a week early just to kind of help secure a win. But even with Newby not playing on the defense, though, they still forced 3 picks. So, I mean, they were getting pressure on the Kobe Tracy. The secondary did their job. So, yeah, if this Idaho team is back healthy, I think they've got a good chance to at least make it to another rematch in Bozeman.
Yeah, I didn't have too much more to add. Obviously, you probably would have liked to see 1 or 2 other guys come back healthy to play in one more game before the playoffs get started. But just kind of looking through their roster, there definitely is a little bit of a plug-and-play element to them. They have 4 running backs with 300-plus rushing yards and another one with around 100, I think. So it's good for the Vandals to see so many guys that have stepped up. You never know in the playoffs when it might be your time to get in the game and make a big play. So they've got plenty of guys with experience this season.
Yeah, we'll see. I do also agree with everyone else that the Vandals are not getting the respect they deserve. We also didn't mention that, yes, they had those 3 tough losses, but they've been winning throughout the year with them missing their quarterback half of the year and starting a lot of freshmen that they probably didn't plan on to, but they've been getting it done. So shout out to the Vandals on a great year. That's going to wrap up this episode of the Big Sky Now podcast. Join us again on Thursday where we'll break down the matchups for the playoffs. I cannot wait. First taste of FCS playoff action for me, so I'm very excited about it. I want to thank my panel, Fritz, John, and Ian, for joining us. And we still wish best wishes to Mark and hope his leg is recovering nicely and hope that he can join us for the postseason. We'll see you all on Thursday. Thank you for joining us for another Big Sky Now episode. And until then, take care.